Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope you are out there enjoying your week so far. And, if you are leading a company, managing teams, making high stakes decisions daily, or just really getting after it, then you know that your energy, your cognition, your health, your fitness, your emotional world, your spiritual world, and your resilience, none of these things are optional. These are your edge. These are all a necessity to be able to perform at the highest level that you can. But a lot of times, and here's one of the big problems though, a lot of leaders these days are unfortunately running on what we call an outdated health operating system. And this system it's reactive, it's fragmented, it's random. A lot of times it's held together by caffeine, convenience, comfort, willpower. All these things stop us from ultimately performing at the highest level that we're capable of. And in today's volatile, fast moving world, times are rapidly moving in terms of we have so much technological disruption. The way of work is so different for leaders now. So these things are not going to cut it. And so this live has one central focus, and it might be a little different of a health talk than you maybe expect. And that is about upgrading your health operating system and ultimately providing a framework that will serve you as a high level leader to stay fit, to stay sharp, and do so in a way to where you're not neglecting the most important things in your life and you're able to enjoy the life that you're building right now. And so we're going to do this through a four-part system that I call the 4Ps. It is a framework that I use for myself. It's a framework that I use for anyone that I advise. So you will definitely get something out of it. Now, before we dive in, I want to quickly introduce myself. And my name is Julian Hayes II. I am the founder of Executive Health. And, rather than run through a list of titles and all these things, I rather tell you a little bit about what I believe and why this all matters to me. And most importantly, I believe that health is our most underutilized competitive advantage. It's the single greatest thing that a leader can have in their arsenal. It's literally $1 billion asset, and most are unfortunately managing it like a liability. I also believe that CEOs, founders, and other A-level leaders should operate and should think of themselves as high-performing athletes. And that means you're going to be strategic. That means you're going to be resilient. And that means you're going to surround yourself by a world-class team for optimal support and to keep you performing. And at the end of the day, this all revolves around three big things: impact, family, and sovereignty. Those are three big pillars for me. And health is the primary driver behind all three of these things. And I've seen too many times that leaders are winning in business, they're winning on the outside, but behind closed doors, it's an entirely different story where you have someone who's exhausted, you have someone who's depleted, you have someone who's disconnected, you have someone whose relationships are a little more fragmented. And I don't believe success has to come at the expense of your well-being and your relationships. So what I do is provide infrastructure and the accountability that leaders need to operate at a world-class level without sacrificing their energy, their people, the life they're building. So it's fully integrated. It's a high-touch system built around you to extend your prime, future-proof your health for decades. Now, if any of this stuff that I just mentioned speaks to you, then go ahead and message me. But for now, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. And sustainable high performance. A lot of times we can talk about peak performance, but when we just use peak performance, it's more just for that one single event. But as business leaders, you are an athlete, as I mentioned earlier. Business is 24/7. Business has no off days. And so we need high performance, but we need it to be sustainable over the long haul. And so here's the problem. And I already mentioned some of these things on the left already. But when you start to think about your high performance operating system and operating as a high level leader, to the right are some critical aspects of your day-to-day life. And adding all these things up that I have to the right there, these can all be bundled up and labeled as simply part of your capacity. And capacity is a word that I've been using recently because, in a nutshell, this is the single greatest trait that I believe us as leaders need in this world now and going forward with everything moving so fast. Now, health for leaders, it's not just a physical thing. It's not remotely that at all. It's, once again, and most importantly, it's a thing with capacity. It's not just productivity. It's not just your aesthetics. I'm talking about your margin, your capacity, your ability to absorb the various types of pressure that comes your way day in and day out, your ability to handle complexity and continue to move forward, your ability to operate under ambiguity, operate under uncertainty, and stay composed without burning out, without breaking down, or just letting your health just fall to the wayside due to everything that's going on. And so I believe the capacity focus here is the difference between a leader who's going to perform well occasionally versus the one who sustains peak performance across the quarters, across the seasons, and across the decades. And so, as I like to say, and you'll hear me say this a lot in the coming months and probably years, capacity is oxygen for modern CEOs and founders and all sorts of other A-level decision makers. And this is going to bring us to what the 4 pillars of your health operating system here. And I'm not going to read in every little detail here, but if you think about it, every high functioning business is going to run on systems and it's going to run on structure. And if you think about it, our health should run this way also. Because, and this is a notion that I always say, that run your body like a business. A lot of times business leaders who struggle with health but are very successful in their business endeavors, if they took a lot of the principles and distilled those basic principles that made them successful in that arena and brought it to their health, they would easily be in a much better situation when it comes to their health because the same rules apply. And so with the health operation, with the health operating system that I use and think from is built on these core 4 pillars. And this is how I think about it. Number 1 is you're going to have your physiology, which you can think of as your hardware. It's the foundation of everything. Next, we're going to move over and we're going to have our psychology. And continuing on the chain here, you're going to have your precision. And then lastly, you're going to have power. Now, I briefly mentioned these because I'm going to go through each one in a little more detail here, but I wanted to share this image here and also start to get in your head that sequencing matters. And so the first one here is going to be our physiology. And with our physiology, it is your hardware, as I mentioned. It's like your energy, it's your recovery, your resilience, your body composition, your level of fitness and strength that you're able to go with throughout the day. It's your sleep quality and different parts of sleep architecture. It's your ability to show up and last. And so that's durability. And if this aspect breaks down in you, then everything else is going to follow suit in a cascade-like effect. And we can see this a lot. We can see a lot of leaders who have sharp minds, sharp ambition, lots of ambition, actually. But over time, what happens is their body becomes their bottleneck. And you start to probably see this maybe 35 plus, and definitely probably the mid 40s at the latest if someone hasn't really started to take care of their health just yet. You'll see this where you can maybe get away with not as being as diligent with your health as you should be. But over time, that's going to catch up with you. And that's when your health becomes your bottleneck. So, and the bottleneck happens through things like excessive amounts of sleep debt. Now, let's be realistic. A lot of us have a lot of moving parts here. So you're not necessarily going to always get the perfect optimal amount of sleep. I don't even do that myself. But over time, consistently and chronically having a sleep debt, that starts to add up. Inflammation that's not managed, dysregulated blood sugar, being overweight, circadian mismanagement and misalignment. These are all things that add up quietly to lead to what I call invisible taxes. And with these invisible taxes, you are going to be paying for these things daily, whether you realize it or not. And I think it is much like credit cards and credit card interest. And this is a very painful mistake that I had to learn in my early 20s when it comes to credit cards and the interest on that. These things only get more expensive over time if you, or I should say, when you ignore them. And as the slide says here, you don't rise to the occasion, you fail to the level, or sorry, you fall to the level of your physiology. That is your floor. And so next we have our internal logic here, and that's going to be your psychology. And this pillar here, when we think about health, it's your emotional regulation, it's your stress resilience, it's your confidence, it's your mental acuity, it's your identity, and it's your self-perception, and it's your default programming for better or worse. And a lot of times when we think about health optimization, this aspects like this is what we forget. We tend to gravitate toward different types of diets, what type of workouts we should be doing, but we forget about the internal logic aspect of it. We forget about the psychographical part of the whole puzzle. And this is really what guides us to take those actions or not take those actions. And in a business context here, in a leadership context, this pillar is going to shape how you respond under pressure, how you think, how you lead. And once again, as we mentioned earlier, these things interconnect. They're transferable. So therefore, this same logic actually applies to your health and fitness. If you think about it, how do you handle stress? When we ask, this is a question I was asked a long time ago. How do you do stress? When a lot of stress comes and when a lot of pressure comes, how do you respond? How do you act? For a lot of people, and I remember this in medical school, and I only stayed a year. But I remember during that time, there would be a high percentage of people, and I see business people do this as well, that when there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of stress, people grab toward something comforting, almost as a way to offset that. And a lot of times, something that's comforting is going to be something sweet that's combined with fat a lot. And so maybe that's ice cream or some kind of comforting food that balances that out. And so this is why this pillar is very important, because it's not a matter of if, but when a lot of pressure is going to come, a lot of stress is going to come. And so how are you going to manage your health? How are you going to have these fail safes in for when those moments arrive? Because this is when a lot of times leaders let the proverbial fall off the fitness wagon thing happens. And of course, when this is off, your vision, your focus, your relationships are going to suffer to a certain extent. And of course, your health and fitness, and that's going to manifest maybe through poor lab work, body composition, adding an extra body fat, all sorts of things. And I cannot emphasize this enough, that your inner architecture drives everything. And when you upgrade this, you don't just get more done, you become someone entirely different in the process. And I think that's one of the most underspoken aspects of people who continually thrive with their health compared to people who is more like a seesaw. There hasn't been an identity shift yet, whereas I'm the type of person that does this no matter what. That small delineation makes a huge difference when it comes to long-term sustainable success with your health. And so for our third pillar here, let's move forward. We have precision. This is system configuration. And most high performers, from my observation here, it's never an issue of a lack of effort. It's never due to direct negligence. It's never due to laziness. Instead, it's more falling short because either the system is vague, the system is outdated, the approach is maybe a one size fits all, or the channel, the system, the approach, there's no way to ensure that you stay consistent and accountable. So maybe that's you have no one to be accountable with. And so it's those little things, those little nuances that is the difference. And this aspect here is a little different compared to maybe someone that's a little more in the general population, that's a little more of a beginner, because they're sometimes for them, it's a motivation issue. It's an inspiration issue, just getting them to take action. Whereas here, that's not necessarily the case. And so this pillar, first and foremost, the reason why I love the word precision is it's about efficiency and it's about effectiveness. And you're most likely someone who is going to be heavily time constrained. You have numerous interests, you have numerous projects going on simultaneously. And so efficiency and effectiveness is absolutely pivotal for long-term sustainable success with your health. And things that can help with that now is, of course, being more data-driven. So you can have something to measure and then manage ultimately. And then taking all those inputs, all that data, and leveraging that into something that's a little more personalized for you and is tailored to you. And obvious metrics that can help with that, of course, is going to be getting consistent lab work and seeing how that looks. That gives you an insight into how you're living over the last quarter or so. Of course, you can use wearables. That can be a form of accountability as well. If activity is an issue, you can set goals on there. You can and then you can check things like your HRV and other different metrics. But things like creating a positive feedback loop is also underrated. I think it was the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, I believe. And it was something about habit formation. And a guy who just went into the gym. I might have the story wrong, so excuse me with this if it's a little wrong. But I think he was trying to build up the exercise habit. And his goal was just to walk into the gym. And then that was going to be considered a success. And it seems so easy that it's too easy to not fail. But I think in that moment, what you're doing is you're building momentum and you're shifting your identity. There's another great book that's similar in this kind of philosophy here. It's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it's the same thing, right? So how can you create positive feedback loops? How can you create little shifts that signals that it's time to exercise, it signals that it's time to do other different habits? And you also have tailored recovery and nutrition strategies. These are also beneficial to you continually to perform at a high level. But lastly here, another overlooked one is creating these habits and routines that are going to be tailored to how you specifically mentally and emotionally operate. Like I can tell someone, this is how I go about my fitness routine. But if you're not mentally or emotionally wired like me, it's not going to be effective. It can be the greatest plan in the world, but you have to think about, once again, pillar number 2, your psychology, and then stack that upon this pillar here to create that framework, to create that system to stay consistent. Because we want to aim for as little guesswork, as little fluff as possible. And the reason why we want to do this, one of the other reasons is we have a lot of things to already think about. I don't want to have to always think about what am I going to eat? When am I going to exercise? When am I going to do this? When am I going to do that? Because what we're doing is think of yourself like a little iPhone battery. And if you start your morning 100% in the green and all these little decisions right here that you really don't necessarily need to be making, these are taking little percentages off that battery right now, draining yourself. But you have important work decisions as well. And that's where you want to use more of that mental bandwidth, more of that energy toward those important work decisions, and have some of these other things on autopilot. And so the last pillar here is going to be power. This is our output. This is what the world sees. This is the results of the efforts that we put in, and the external world, people are going to see this. So this is things like executive presence, having that charisma, consistency, focus, sovereignty once again. And power is last because power only works to its fullest if the physiology is set, then the psychology, then the precision. These are all three dialed in, and these pillars then are going to stack upon one another. And when they're not aligned, this is when you maybe don't operate as effectively as you could. You move differently, you lead differently. Sequencing absolutely matters. It matters in so many things. And I don't even think it's just a health thing. I think it's really a principle for life to really think about, is that the sequencing that we do things, while it seems subtle, can make a vast difference. So this is a lot of maybe theory, information, high level thinking right here. And so I wanted to share a few examples of what a capacity leak, we can call it, would look like in a day-to-day real world setting. So let's have an example here of an individual. They're during their high intensity training, maybe they work out 6 days a week. They're eating super clean. Their diet is on point, but they can't lose weight still. But they're doing all these things. They're working really hard. And so as we look at one of these pillars here, that can be a potential issue with precision. So the inputs that they have when it comes to their health, what are they doing? Maybe this person has something with their lab work. Maybe they're not sleeping right. So there's some type of issue that needs to be dialed in that is causing this ineffectiveness, even though this person is putting in effort, doing the things they think they're supposed to be doing. Another one is you can have someone who is absolutely crushing it one quarter, and then the very next quarter or the next quarter after that, this person is not performing. He has a dramatic decrease in their performance. And this can be a host of things, but this is likely, I would categorize in the physiology and the psychology pillars breakdown. And then you can probably also secondarily throw in someone in the precision category. And the next one is, and this is one that we probably heard stories about or seen, and this is a person who scales their company to tremendous levels and they get a successful exit, or they rise up the ranks and now they're in the C-suite. But that whole process, perhaps maybe they lost touch or that strong connection with their family. And this is the proverbial sacrificing or trading success in for well-being and missing those things and not having both, but looking at it as an either or. And here you can look at, maybe there's a misalignment of the emotional bandwidth, which can be a combination of psychology and power. And there's even probably a dash of precision here, where the inputs, the strategy, the structuring of how to take care of both of these worlds optimally were not actually laid out as good for them. So no matter these things, though, a lot of times, and I used to hear this a lot when I was personal training in person, is a lot of times people really took these things personally and thought it was flaws in themselves, that they couldn't achieve something, that they couldn't do something. And it's not a character flaw at all. It's not an issue of capability. If anything, it's just what I say is an architectural flaw in your particular health operating system. So very rarely is a person going to be underperforming because you're lazy, because you're broken, you're just not capable or skilled enough. That's not necessary. It's really an underperformance because the system is just not optimized. So truly think of your body, truly think of your health as this integrated, interconnected system. A lot of times with the mainstream, especially with health, unfortunately, health and fitness is often spoken in silos. Different worlds exist, right? So I remember I went to the doctor a lot with my father, and he would go see one doctor, then go see another specialist and another specialist. But a lot of times the information was not as integrated and connected with each other as it should have been. And I mean, personally caused a lot of frustration, but I think also it led to not as effective of care. And I think a lot of times outside of the medical standpoint here, I think people in our personal lives, we do this. We tend to silo things instead of having everything be one interconnected system. And so there's a lot I throw at you, a lot of talking, but I want to break this down and to give you some takeaway, to give you something to do today to start doing for this week. And so your action step, what I want you to do is to audit your health operating system. which of these 4 pillars when I was talking about, which are you strongest in? Which do you feel best about? Which one feels a little fragile? Which one feels like it needs to be boosted up, needs a little focus and improvement? Is it your physiology? Maybe there's some aspects of that or maybe you have fantastic habits right now with your fitness. You're already working out. You're already, you have a pretty good diet. You're getting your sleep. You're meditating, but maybe you're still not getting some sort of result that you want. So maybe you look into the precision category and see what inputs am I doing? Where does my strategy need to be a little tweaked? And you don't need to overhaul your entire life. A lot of you all are business people, and you know that a business doesn't launch 6 new verticals overnight. It doesn't start 4 new services at one time. I did this when I was younger, and of course you already know the result of doing that. So don't overload your entire system. Start with one, optimize that, reinvest in that, and then repeat that. And that's how modern leaders are going to build long-term health. That's how they're going to build resilience. And that's how they're going to build performance. And I think most importantly, this is how they're going to be able to, quote unquote, have it all. Succeed in business, succeed in whatever professional endeavors they want, have their personal health, but still enjoy the life that they're doing this for and building. And so that's with family, with friends, it's impacting their community and so forth. And so if any of this resonated with you, any questions, or you want to just upgrade your health operating system with more of a high-touch, team-based systems approach, feel free to send me a message, DM me, and we can definitely talk. And until next time, stay awesome, be limitless, and optimize today so you can lead tomorrow. Peace.